We can now add Medicaid fraud to the list of accusations against 4 people arrested for their alleged roles in Hennepin County's sex trafficking scheme. The suspects include a now former Anoka County prosecutor.
Investigators believe they've answered some of the pressing questions. The Attorney General's office filed a connected fraud case against Salman Elmi.
Good afternoon, beautiful people, and happy Wednesday. You guys, I don't even know how many times that I have talked about the fraud happening in Minnesota. Feeding Our Future fraud, Medicaid fraud, housing programs, autism service, millions, if not billions of taxpayer dollars allegedly disappearing through programs that were supposed to help vulnerable people. But this latest case, this one takes the story somewhere even darker because prosecutors are now alleging that a Medicaid fraud operation has connections to people accused in a sex trafficking scheme involving vulnerable women. And while Minnesota continues dealing with case after case involving public money, Minneapolis taxpayers are simultaneously being told your property taxes may need to go up. But not 2%, not 5%. Mayor Jacob Frey's proposed 2027 budget calls for an 11.3% increase in the property tax levy. And I think taxpayers have every right to start asking some questions, some very uncomfortable questions. So welcome to Nellie Miranda. As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. But let's start with this Medicaid case.
Always going to make us money. I'm going to make us rich. I'm smiling because I'm going to take over this whole state. That is the message the alleged head of a sex trafficking ring sent to a celebrated Twin Cities entrepreneur who is now linked to the crime. Today, investigators say this all goes far beyond sex workers, linking those two to other ringleaders and millions in Medicaid fraud.
The man at the center of this portion of the investigation is Salman Ahmad Elmi, a 30-year-old from St. Paul. According to the criminal complaint, Elmi is facing 3 counts of aiding and abetting theft by swindle and 5 counts of aiding and abetting theft by false representation. And here's where this story gets more interesting. State records reportedly show that Elmi had previously received an Outstanding Refugee Award for entrepreneurship from the Minnesota Department of Human Services. Yes, the same state agency connected to Medicaid administration had previously recognized him for entrepreneurship. And now prosecutors accuse him of participating in a scheme involving fraudulent Medicaid billing. Fox 9 reports that Elmi is accused of billing Medicaid for more than $1 million in services that were either not provided or weren't eligible for reimbursement. The businesses involved reportedly provided autism services and adult rehab mental health services. Prosecutors allege documents were falsified to obtain Medicaid reimbursements and that people associated with the operation directed employees to pay kickbacks to individuals in exchange for using their information for claims. But I just have to pause and just mention this because foreigners, we are not big on mental health. Foreigners just aren't big on mental health. My dad did not care that I was sad when I was a kid. So for now, all of a sudden, for the state to not question the fact that there is a bunch of foreigners, Somalians, running mental health services, autism services, things like that, get out of here. When my dad was told that I might have ADHD, he told the teacher, no, she just needed a whooping. And so now all of a sudden, the foreign community, the immigrant community just started caring so much more about mental health. Spare us. But I digress. So the information regarding his Medicaid fraud billing, that's just one piece of the story. We'll get to the next part in just a second. But first, I have to tell you about Chapter because a lot of families eventually find themselves helping a parent or grandparent figure out Medicare. And it can get confusing very quickly. There are different plans, different coverage, different costs. And I'm sure a lot of people assume that once they choose a Medicare plan, that they're done. But your needs can change, and so can your options. And that is why I partnered with Chapter. Because Chapter connects you with licensed Medicare advisors who can compare every Medicare plan nationwide instead of simply pushing one insurance company's plan. They advocate for you and not the insurance company. And what I really like is the honesty. Because if you're already on the best plan for your needs, they'll tell you so. And if you're not, they can help you understand your options and potentially switch you to a better plan that works for you. No unnecessary pressure, just straightforward guidance to help you make sense of Medicare. So if you or someone in your family needs help reviewing their Medicare options, please be sure to call Chapter at 646-817-8160. That is 646-817-8160, or go to askchapter.org/Nellie. Now back to the story. So it is reported that Elmy, Frank Reeves, Victoria Comanache, and former Anoka County prosecutor Andrea Sampson were associated with 4 agencies: Riva Health, Riva Autism, Helpful Housing, and Home Health Assisted Living, billing Medicaid for more than $4.5 million since 2023, all the while being connected to a sex trafficking operation.
30-year-old Salman Elmy, at one point recognized by Minnesota's Department of Human Services as an outstanding refugee award for entrepreneurship. Now he's accused of taking advantage of that very service, as more than a dozen victims were sex trafficked in the process. It's only today we're getting an idea of just how complex this scheme was. Frank Reeves, Victoria Comanache, Andrea Sampson, and now Salman Elmy. 4 names accused of running 4 agencies: Riva Health, Riva Autism, Helpful Housing, and Home Health Assisted Living. Monday, we're learning those 4 billing more than $4.5 million to Medicaid since 2023. Court documents say the scheme started with recruiting young women who are often homeless or struggling with addiction, housing, or finances. From there, they would rent apartments for those women in their own names, using fake pay stubs and enrolling them in a pay-for-sex scheme investigators say they've been tracking since 2019. From there, documents say the 4 leaders began stealing their victims' identities to bill Medicaid in their name. Investigators say at the center of this scheme is Elmy, who got the loan and incorporated Riva Health and has since transferred more than $140,000 from those accounts to his own business.
It's incredibly significant. It's also very indicative of what trafficking is as a whole.
Heidi Clegg works for Breaking Free, a Minnesota group that helps people escape trafficking. She says she believes these arrests could just be the tip of the iceberg.
These are not just gangs. They're not scary people stealing people off the street. These are people that you work with every day. They're people who are in our communities, who are living next door to us, who are participating in these things.
Attorney General Keith Ellison seems to be really proud of himself because he posted on X saying, "Today, I charged 2 individuals with more than $1.5 million in Medicaid fraud. Medicaid dollars are meant to provide health care to low-income Minnesotans, not line the pockets of fraudsters. My team and I have secured more than 340 Medicaid fraud convictions, averaging 1 every 8 days since I first became your Attorney General. If you try to cheat Minnesotans, we will find you and we will hold you accountable." Alrighty then, Mr. Ellison, you should hold yourself accountable, but a win is a win. But just think about the allegations of sex trafficking for a second. If prosecutors prove this case, we're not simply talking about somebody allegedly creating fake invoices or exaggerating hours on a Medicaid claim. It means that they allegedly exploited vulnerable people in one operation, while their identities were allegedly exploited to obtain taxpayer money in another. So yes, the allegations still have to be proven in court, but oh my word, a member of the Somalian community strikes again. One of the most interesting aspects regarding Salman Elmy is that he wasn't some completely unknown person operating entirely outside of the system, because he had been publicly recognized because he was involved in a Minneapolis startup called Tavallo. Tavallo had received funding from Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank, and Elmy was listed as one of its founders. Obviously, Kevin O'Leary had nothing to do with his bad decisions, but the relevance is that this was someone who publicly had the image of a successful entrepreneur. He had received state recognition, he had business connections, and prosecutors are now painting a dramatically different picture through these criminal charges. And that is exactly why oversight matters, because government programs involving enormous amounts of taxpayer money cannot operate on trust alone. There have to be controls, there have to be audits, and people asking questions when billing suddenly explodes. Salman Elmy went onto a podcast called Telamung podcast, and he was asked about the fraud in the Somalian community and how the money was going overseas. And he responded saying that he is not fully educated on the subject of the fraud committed by the Somalian community. But if they were defrauding the system and sending the majority of the money back to Somalia, then they should be investigated. Take a listen.
And I hate to bring it back to it, but this is what happened. You know, a lot of the money that people made, especially the Somali community made, they funneled it back to Somalia, right? And so again, people are just going to say it's you that feels like, hey, you know, you're contributing here. You want to, you know, keep your money here. But the thing is, most Somalians, they funneled their money back that were doing the fraud, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that money got funneled back there, and Americans will say, why doesn't it stay here?
Yeah. For our family, you know, it was like, you know, $50. Like a family would call us and be like, yeah, I need $50. Like, I really need, you know, support. It's like the small amounts of money that really would just help them get by. And intrinsically, that's good to really support your family back home, right? But I don't know about that amount of money that was leaving. And if people were doing that, like, I definitely think that's completely wrong, and that we should investigate that, figure out what's going on with that. But
I do not think Americans are upset about immigrant families sending $50 to $100 back to your country for someone to buy food or basic necessities. Millions, though? Yes, Americans have a problem with that, and rightfully so. Stolen taxpayer dollars at that. And then the response is always, we pay taxes too. Get out of town. I know those two guys who interviewed him on this podcast had their jaws on the floor Monday because, dang, not you too. The whole interview, he kept talking about people need to be more neighborly with the Somalian community, etc., that many of them are simply just trying to get by, that they feel like they are equally a part of the American fabric, so on and so forth. But for him to play into the stereotype that they discussed on the show really makes you go, dang, it is almost all of you. But I digress. Pivoting back to Minnesota fraud investigations, eventually the conversation has to move beyond, look, we caught another person. The bigger question becomes, why does this keep happening? How are these operations allegedly getting access to millions and millions of dollars before someone stops them? Because taxpayers aren't writing checks directly to these companies. Government is acting as the middleman. Government collects the money, administers the program, and approves the providers. So the government ultimately has a responsibility to protect those funds. And yet, time and time and time again, they've dropped the ball. Fire everyone at this point. So while all this fraud keeps being uncovered in Minnesota, Minneapolis residents are being told that the city needs more taxpayer money. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has unveiled his proposed budget for 2027, and the city is dealing with roughly a $60 million budget gap. So what is the solution? Cuts, potential layoffs, and a pretty significant property tax increase.
My 2027 budget proposal totals approximately $2.3 billion, including a general fund of $753 million. It proposes an 11.3% increase to the proposed tax levy, about $409 a year, or $34 a month for the median value homeowner. Second, we have cut 100 positions in our city government. But to be clear, we did not begin with layoffs.
Minneapolis is proposing an 11.3% tax increase while cutting roughly 100 positions. And at the same time, Minnesota continues to uncover major allegations of fraud involving taxpayer-funded programs. Now, I am not saying that Medicaid fraud alone caused Minneapolis budget deficit, but come on. People understand that government services cost money. But when you are asking families to pay hundreds of dollars more every year while millions of taxpayer dollars are allegedly being lost to fraud, people have every right to demand better oversight. Prosecuting fraud after the money is gone is important, but prevention has to come first. So the question is, does Minnesota simply have a fraud problem, or does it have an oversight problem that continues allowing these schemes to happen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you got any value from today's video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. And ring the bell so you don't miss any future updates. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.